Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to David's Celebration of Life. We're going to hear a lot of, I'm sure, wonderful stories about David, and some funny stories about David, about camaraderies and so on. And so instead of mourning, let's celebrate. And celebrate the extraordinary man that he was. Thank you.
Susie is absolutely right, and it's wonderful that you all are here. I'm Andy Horton with Film and Media Studies here at OU. Knew Dave for years, knew him through dealing with Ned Hockman, and we celebrated him too. Our family moved here from New Orleans, and so celebrate is the right word. I open with simply a line from Dr. Seuss that I've added to Dave. Don't cry that he's gone. Smile that he was here. Dr. Seuss. Our first guest speaker is Eugene Enrico.
I've known Dave Smeal since 1985. We made 17 programs for public television together. The first we made was released in 1986. It was called Music of Thomas Morley. He was a composer from the age of Shakespeare. In 1987, we collaborated on two programs, Music of Vivaldi and Renaissance musical comedy, really, called Festino. In 1988, we made our first program overseas, and they sang a new song, collaboration with art historian Susan Caldwell, who's here today, which we filmed along pilgrimage trails to Santiago de Compostela, both in Spain and in France. In 1989, we made our first program in Japan about gagaku, which is the court music of ancient Japan. Esoteric, I suppose, even the Japanese. We were able to film in royal palaces both in Tokyo and Kyoto. And we went on to make 4 other programs in Japan about traditional types of music there. In 1990, we filmed our second program in Spain. It was Music at the Time of Columbus, which was released internationally in 1992 to coincide with the 500th anniversary of Columbus's first voyage to America. Meanwhile, we made several additional programs here in Oklahoma and Texas. The last program we worked on together was called Isabella d'Este, First Lady of the Renaissance, which, lucky us, we were able to film in Rome, Ferrara, Bologna, Mantua, and Venice in Italy. It was first broadcast nationally by PBS in 2002 and has been rebroadcast several times since. Now, to edit these programs, we worked together at a television studio that was in the bowels of the OU football stadium, literally hundreds of hours together, with me as apprentice filmmaker. Dave, of course, was a master filmmaker and a master teacher. He showed me how to film a sequence and how to edit it into a polished program. He taught me the logic, grammar, and rhetoric of filmmaking, as well as the technical details of how to execute the many possibilities of moving from one scene to another. Dave was a true artist, both as a filmmaker and as a photographer. His documentary portrayals of OU, broadcast during football games, showed all of America the importance of OU as a national leader, not only in football, but also in teaching, scholarship, and research. As a photographer, he not only captured the best of OU for posters and flyers, but he also skillfully documented the process of all of our projects together in photographs that are particularly precious to me. Dave was not only an important colleague, he was also a wonderful friend. My wife Sherry and I often joined Dave and Susie and their daughters Heather and Christy at Lake Thunderbird, where we enjoyed great cookouts. And it was there that I learned my most valuable lesson from Dave. He always emphasized to his family and to us, said, be sure to leave the campsite in a better condition than when you found it. So he left our lives and this world a better place because he was here.
Dr. James Pappas, the Dean of the College of Liberal Studies. I first met Dave when I arrived at the university and was working with the Public Affairs Office developing programs and videos. At the time, I believed he was the information director for the electronic media and photography services. After several years, in 1996, his division was transferred to the College of Continuing Education, and he worked closely with Gordon Green, who did radio programming, and Bob Taylor, who did still photography. He was involved with coordinating and working with electronic media and television services. David was always a thorough professional, and I can never remember a time when there was a problem or issue with that unit and with Dave's management. Additionally, it appeared that he was an exceptional videographer because all the work that he produced was extremely well done and effective. I enjoyed talking OU football and science fiction with Dave, who was very knowledgeable about these areas. I was always intrigued with his insider information about OU football and his vast knowledge about the various science fiction authors and programs. One of the other things that was especially impressive about Dave was the positive feelings that all of his colleagues and coworkers had for him. Whenever Dave's name was mentioned, everyone seemed to have a positive comment or an effective story about his generous nature and support. One of the things that impressed me very much was watching how Dave worked with Ned Hoffman, who was a close friend. In his later years, Ned had a number of health problems and issues with getting around. Dave was always so gracious and caring because he made a point of bringing Ned to all the university and CCE events, including the National Press Photographers activities, a number of university events featuring OU photography and videos, and displays related to the forum and the CCE activities. I also remember that he was one of the key video producers of the early music series, where he worked with Professor Eugene Enrico to provide TV programs related to European music and other areas. For me, it was always fun to see Dave because he was always a positive outlook and was always upbeat. Seeing Dave was always like having a burst of sunshine. I always enjoyed his manner and responsiveness. A friend to all, a caring and thoughtfully active colleague, and someone who went beyond to help those in need. David Smeal will be missed. Dr. Pappas. Dr. George Henderson, Professor Emeritus of Human Relations, Education, and Sociology.
You didn't know that Dave was my brother, did you? Well, he was. Dave was a brother from another mother and father. While he was working on the project with Professor Enrico and others, he was also charged with somehow filming and capturing aspects of this guy from Detroit called George Henderson, who was stirring up things around Oklahoma, talking about civil rights, human rights, and change. One day I said, Dave, you're going to get a bad reputation following me around. He says, it's the camera, it's not me. You got it. But truthfully, in many ways, in many ways, Dave was responsible for me being able to achieve so many things at the university and throughout the state. He was my unofficial public relations person. He captured me in meetings and conferences and the speeches that I was giving on campus and in other places. And consequently, I was able to write in the introduction to my book, Race in the University, that we were ordinary people who did some extraordinary things, and Dave was one of us. We did some extraordinary things because we cared. What I want to share with you today is this aspect of Dave and George Henderson. He would stop by my office and he was excited about the project with Professor Enrico. One day he stopped by and I had Nina Simone on and she was singing, and he said, "Whoa." And then I said, "If you like that, Dave, listen to this." And then I put the Modern Jazz Quartet on. And he started rocking and grooving, and I said, "This is the brother." From that moment on, our bond wasn't the academic things, it was music. It was music in ways that I can't really describe to you. I celebrate the fact that in many of the activities that I was involved in, he was there. Forget the camera for a moment. He was there, he was smiling, he was nodding, and in many ways he was saying, "You go, boy." And I did. And after the end of each presentation, he would find a way to come up to me and he'd say, "George, I don't know how you do it, but you managed to keep me interested." I smiled and I realized this guy has a sense of humor too. Let me say this about him in a more serious vein as we celebrate. Fred Yerby wrote what I share with my students from time to time, but I'm going to modify "You are a part of me." In my interactions with Dave, this is appropriate. You are a part of me. I do not know by what slow chemistry you first became a vital fiber of my being. Your smile and nod and constant presence, and your affirmation let me know that I was not alone. I was not alone, this stranger in this strange place called Oklahoma, because as long as you were present, Dave, I had friends, and we were a crowd. We were a motley crowd at times. You telling some raunchy jokes, and me trying to counter, and finally we said, "It's a draw. Let me hear Cannonball Adderley now," he said, and I would stroke it up and put it on, and he would rock again, and he'd say, "Grooving." This is about us grooving and remembering a man who was more than just a man, a colleague who was more than just a colleague. I have many friends. I didn't have very many, and still do not have very many real close friends who understand me. He understood me in ways that I will forever, ever cherish. And so for the young people here, for the family members who are here, friends who are here, you were blessed to have him. I was blessed to know him. And I'm a better person because of him. How blessed do I feel? I'll close with this. I turned down an offer to do a speaking engagement in Hawaii to be here. And when I told Barbara what I was going to do, she said, "I hope you have a one-way ticket to Hawaii." I said, "Hawaii will always be there. Dave is not here, but his family will be here. I must be here." It was never about the publicity. It was never about the Hall of Fames. It was never about the awards and honors. It was always about friends like Dave. So I came to say, thank you for sharing my friend, me. And for those of you who knew him in other ways, I say thank you for being a friend of a man who made an indelible impression upon me. George Henderson, David Ross Boyd Professor, Sylvan and Golden Professor, Regents Professor, Presidential Professor. None of those things matter. George Henderson with a closet and a garage full of awards and plaques. None of those things matter. What I cherish most are not the awards and the honor, but the opportunity to meet men and women like Dave. It's for them, and it's because of them that I came today. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you. Folks, don't you feel and hear the laughter? What's happening here? Having lived in New Orleans, this is the spirit of New Orleans celebrating on many levels. I teach a lot of comedy. It's important in life. People who laugh live longer, scientists tell us. And in my life, I've seen tombstones. One of them was Ernie Kovacs from early TV comedy. Some of you in this room know who he was. I visited his tombstone. It says, "Nothing in moderation." Dave, you were not in moderation in enjoying life and family and friends and work. Who was Dave Smeal? This is Gordon Green, friend and colleague. Dave Smeal was my former boss, my closest OU colleague, and my friend of almost 30 years. He was a photographer, videographer, husband to Susie, father to Heather and Christy, soccer dad deluxe to all his daughter's friends, and he was OU family through and through. Dave loved technology and sci-fi films. We're getting that message. He knew the features of all the latest cameras, video, and sound equipment. And he would drive all the way to Dallas just to see a film like Star Trek on a slightly bigger screen. I admired the way he commented and committed to projects. And once he did, he was on it until it was complete. He was also well organized. He had a place for everything and kept everything in its place. I wish I had $1 for every time I heard him say, "We gotta get the new software upgrade," for the word processor, sound editor, or whatever. I never quite understood that because neither of us had learned to use the old software very well. Over the years, Dave and I shared more than 1,000 lunches, usually with other guys in the public relations office, Jill, Jane, Bill Williams, Brian Hamrick, and Bob Taylor. But the lunch I remembered best was when Dave and I were eating alone, and Mary Howell, a friend I knew from church, walked into the restaurant and spotted me. Mary was a fun-loving gal, and she saw an opportunity for a great prank. She came over to the table, bent down, and kissed me on the mouth, then departed without saying a single word. Dave was dumbfounded. As Mary exited the restaurant, he turned to me with question marks all over his face, assuming I'd offer an exclamation. But I saw an opportunity myself, so I only said, "It happens all the time." Another highlight I remember with special delight was being there to see Dave sworn in as new U.S. citizen. Several of us from the office surprised him by showing up for the ceremony to show our support. Perhaps the most telling memory I can share about Dave Smeal occurred in June 1998. We were setting up a sound system in the ballroom of the Union to accommodate a dinner speech by former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger when word came that my daughter-in-law had gone into labor. "You go to the hospital and join your family," he said. "I'll finish up here. Henry Kissinger isn't as important as welcoming your first grandchild into the world." That's the kind of guy Dave was. Family all the way. We'll miss him immensely. Gordon and Jan Green. David Graham, owner of Ad-Type, longtime friend and colleague.
Thank you. Christmas. Yeah. anybody doesn't know, this is my goddaughter, Christy Smeal. And I'm gonna let her hold the microphone so I can read off my cards. I knew our relationship would work out one of these days. David Smeal was my friend. I've known him for over 40 years. We met in the media office here at OU in 1972, which was a long time ago. I knew your parents before you knew your parents. Yeah. He was hired to work in the photo and video side of the university. I did print media, and I knew right away we had absolutely nothing in common. Then I found out he was Canadian. There's something wrong with the border. They're letting people in who shouldn't be. What were they thinking? In spite of our differences, we soon found that no one else would eat lunch with us. We forged a friendship based on cheeseburgers, French fries, and pool at the Golden Q.
Yeah.
You see, my memories are somewhat different than most of the rest of us who've spoken today. Parenthetically, it was never Dave or David. It was Smeal. He always called me Graham. It was lovely. Then I found out about Susie. Apparently he was dating this woman in Tulsa and was thinking about marrying her. I don't know why. I don't know why she would be interested in him. I doubted it would last. My wife Carol and I became friends with David and Susie. I remember one time Susie took the cord out of the head of lettuce, and I looked in awe. I still to this day don't know how she did that. It became very clear that Susie was goofy. Goofy about David, or maybe she was just goofy. I think I know. Marriage was good for Smeal. He had children, he had grandchildren. We all go down that path and we enjoy it. Season football tickets fueled our relationship for at least 20 more years. Every Saturday, my family would come join Susie, David, and their family. And we would enjoy the game, we would enjoy dinner together, and those were the times that I will look back on very fondly. Good thing it's better than Mike, because I can't do this one. David's loss is felt by us all. When I heard the news, I couldn't believe it. My children couldn't believe it. And the first thing they said was, he was such a nice man, and always so good to us. That was David Smeal to me and my family. Thank you.
Let the stories continue. Steve?
See?
Jemiah.
Jemiah.
All right. Longtime friend and investment advisor.
You know what? Smeal. Used to be Smeal, Smell. Oh, Dave says Dave.
It's on.
Dave says nobody knows how to pronounce my name. I said they don't know how to pronounce my name either. Dave and I first met in Calgary. We're both Canadians. We went to Montreal College, and the only reason we graduated from Montreal College, the only reason we got down here is TU happened to have a quota for Canadians. Otherwise, they would never let us into the country, you know. And we we shared an apartment, and this apartment, the rent was very, very cheap. But they didn't charge us for the cockroaches, for the protein. We were very, and Dave and I traveled. There's a picture out there when we were in New Orleans. We drank too much. Could have gotten a lot of trouble because we didn't drink just there. We drank all the way driving there and all the way back. So his kids are probably going to find out that Dave is not this guy that's so perfect either. Anyway, when Dave left Tulsa for a year because he didn't have a green card, I thought he would never come back. But the Lord called him back.
Yes,
For
you did.
Susie, I'm so emotional because we've been friends for 60 years.
You're okay. You're okay.
Yeah, I feel like I lost part of myself.
I know.
Anyway, the Lord did bring him back here to meet Susan. And I was at the wedding, I was the best man.
Yes, you did.
By the way, where's Frank?
Frank. Right there.
I always do with Frank and April. Your buddy April.
Yeah.
She here?
No.
Anyway, Dave and I, my mind's spinning like high frequency trading right now. Being in the financial business all these years. Like somebody said, anybody sitting around watching numbers all day long can't be normal. And that is probably the truth. You know, Dave's a great father. Love his kids. And I'm going to finish here before I fall apart. But Dave is integrity, decency, and things of that nature. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. I'm going to miss him. And I will meet him again in heaven.
Long-lived trips to New Orleans. A former student, Marianne McLean, works with Disney Productions. Hello from California. I say that because in great part I am here in CA, California, working in the movie industry because of Dave. He believed in me until I could believe in myself. As a student at OU, I had the great fortune of being picked by Dave to work with him in his department. We worked on many projects and there was nothing he would not let me try to do. He just wasn't my boss, he was my mentor, always ready with that great big smile and much encouragement. We worked on Live On University together and photographed everything from tornadoes to rattlesnakes, high-speed football to stop-motion animation. I also remember one day when I went to support him on a day we were going to shoot aerial photography over OU. When I got there, he sent me up in the helicopter. I could not believe it, but he trusted me and up I went and got good footage. We also did an amazing trip to Montana to shoot the customs of the Sioux and Cheyenne tribes with Gladys and Reginald Levin. What a magical experience in the mountains, inside teepees, and around campfires. I will always remember the experiences I had with Dave. He was an amazing teacher and a friend, so calm and encouraging. I will miss him very much, Marianne. George Ryan, friend and senior audio engineer.
Thank you very much. Susie, Heather, Christy, thank you for inviting me here. Thanks for letting me be a part of all this. I was an intern with Dave at Electronic Media and Photo Services back in we were housed in the third floor of the Student Union, the old WNAD studios. And we had ghosts talking to us all the time. And it just seemed appropriate that we were all there in the broadcast field, film field, photography field. It was a wonderful place. Dave's typewriter and my typewriter faced each other. We had little cubbies, and we faced each other all day, all afternoon, sometimes well into the night. Dave always encouraged me to look at the big picture. Don't just focus on one little piece. Focus on the entirety of the story. As Daryl Martin might tell you, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to any story. Dave hammered that into my head time and time again. And when I failed at writing something, he would just say, "Now, George." You know how he would draw out, "Well, George." Always in my ears. Dave was all about telling stories. He loved telling stories. He loved describing the university, its people, its history. Oh, one other thing. Dave was very good at life stories as well. I thought this was a Canadian thing, but during the mid-morning when things were slow in the office, we might wander down to the Will Rogers Cafeteria on the first floor of the Student Union, which hasn't existed for years. It's now occupied by fast foods. But we would get a burger, fries or something, and I would notice that Dave didn't salt his French fries, he put pepper on them. I'm going, this has got to be crazy. Nobody puts pepper on French fries. Until I tried it, and I'm going, he's got something here.
George,
So-
try it with brown gravy, it's even better.
Ooh, brown gravy. We'll try that next time, as if my middle needs any more gravy. Dave loved pictures. He loved photography. He loved telling stories with pictures and images. He was a master of it. You almost never saw Dave anywhere without a camera around his neck. Around campus, I was able to share with him covering events, large and small, regents meetings, the very first associates banquet in the old Skirvin Convention Center. I believe that's where Henry Kissinger came and talked. We both had 16mm cameras on our shoulders. He had a tux. I was too young to have one, and I didn't have the money to rent one, so I was in a suit. We also did a lot of the halftime stories that aired with John Brooks and Bob Berry on the old KTOK, Oklahoma News Network football broadcasts. We would do the halftime features about the university. Whatever was going on, we would do 2.5 to 3 minutes, and it was either his voice or my voice, it didn't matter. The story got told, and that's all that really mattered. Dave did many productions around the world with Dr. Enrico, among many others. He was also a colleague of mine. Once I graduated and got out into the world, we became friends and colleagues instead of just teacher and student. He's always been a mentor of mine. He's always been a very, very important person. And I don't think there's a time in the history of the university that the university's activities have been better documented than the 25 years that Dave was there. Working with friends like Gil Jane, Bill Williams, Donna Murphy, all of the ENMPS team that's here today. I don't think the university has ever been better served than when Dave was behind the camera. And Dave loved new technology. After he retired from the university, he would always be snooping around on the internet. He would send links out to everybody about the new technology. Oh, you've got to see this. Check this out. New cameras, new anything. It was a passion of his. And as has been mentioned, he was a very good friend and companion to Ned Hockman in the later years of his life. We should all be so lucky as to have a friend like Dave. Dave was always happy to see you. I don't know if you knew this about him, but he had big hands. He had huge hands. Not in the size of his hands, but when he put his hand on your shoulder, it just made you feel like there was nothing wrong in the world anywhere, that you could do anything. That hand on your shoulder meant so much to me. He was my teacher, he was my mentor, he was my colleague, he was my friend. Thank you.
Sorry, you can't run for president. Amazing. Gerald May, Heather's husband, more than a father-in-law. I first met Dave at a dance at St. Gregory's University in Shawnee, Oklahoma. This was where his oldest daughter, Heather, was attending, as well as myself. This particular night was extra special because this was the dance Heather and I officially started dating. We had been friends for over a year, and in the couple of months prior to the dance, it was a Halloween dance in time period costumes, she was a flower child and I was a beatnik. She was beautiful with flowers in her hair. We started to realize that this friendship was growing into something a little more special. Early that week, we shared our first kiss, which, needless to say, left us trying to figure out just what had happened and where to go from there. So the night of the dance, Heather drags me over and introduces me to my future father-in-law. I was just a tad bit nervous naturally, so when he lifted one eyebrow, looked over his glasses at me, and said with a seemingly knowing smile, "So this is the Jay that I've been hearing about." I got a little flustered and just about blurted out, "It was just a kiss, I promise." LOL. I had no idea what she had told him. I don't know if he sensed my nervousness or what, but he immediately started laughing and doing that firm back slapping that I grew to expect on every encounter. Usually followed by a shoulder squeeze. I have a sarcastic and quick wit by my nature, so I attempted to throw a little banter back where he laughed at all the harder and played right along. I think I thanked him for teaching her the importance of Star Trek and Star Wars. We became instant friends. That was his gift. He had the ability to make anyone feel welcome, like they've known each other forever. After the dance, I remember looking into Heather's eyes and asking, "Can I officially start calling you my girlfriend?" LOL, yeah. I was quite the nerd and not much has changed. I think meeting her dad and feeling so accepted by him really helped solidify just how special she and her family are. And I knew I wanted to be part of that in a big way. As time went by, he and I developed quite the back and forth banter that at times almost seemed scripted. I've often joked that we could make a sitcom from our conversations and adventures. One such a time I remember was when I was visiting their house on one of my earlier visits to their family home. I moved back to Texas after my second year at St. Greg's while Heather stayed there. We maintained our relationship long distance over the next 3 years. This probably happened within the first year sometime. We were all going out and I said I needed to shave first. He piped up to say the same. There was that moment that felt like an old Western standoff. Sam's tumbleweed and soundtrack. We each darted off to our respective bathrooms, me to the guest and he to the master. I was about halfway through my face when he walked up behind me, drying his face with a towel. My jaw dropped. No way he shaved that fast. I didn't even have real facial hair. Just a sad late teen, early 20s attempt at some. He just simply said something about age and wisdom as he confidently strutted away. The whole family thought it was quite hilarious. A couple of days later, as we were about to head out the door again, Dave came walking out of his room with an electric razor, shaving his face as he was talking and getting ready. I stopped in my tracks and just stared at him. I believe I might have called him a cheater. He gave that great head thrown back with laughter that only he could do, and I think even mentioned the age and wisdom bit again. The thing is, I don't think I ever matched that wisdom, regardless of my age. I was constantly learning from him. Over the course of the next 15 years, he was always there to share his wisdom and knowledge, be it encouraging me to study photography or how to maintain my first home. I relied on him for advice about his daughter. Yeah, we talked about her, you, Heather, a lot. And our boys, his 2 grandsons that love their pom-pom. He only gave positive, encouraging advice, never harsh judgments. He was always the first to see any of my finished photographs and always gave the best advice, critiques, and support. I even called him most Tuesdays to find out the best deals on the latest Blu-rays. He and I shared a love of sci-fi and fantasy, as well as a love of cinema. So I knew when I called him that he either had already gone to buy the latest release, or he certainly had the ads in front of him that he could look up and compare for me. I often called him while I was driving and just needed to talk to someone, sometimes just to keep my eyes open while I was driving. He always was there and never turned down a conversation, regardless how mundane the topic. He was the best of friends, definitely more than just a father-in-law. What's funny is that even though we had become such good friends, I was still nervous as all heck when I asked his permission to marry his daughter. Heather and I had been together for 9 years when I finally grew up and bought her a ring. We drove over to Zales for her to do a little shopping, and I called him when we got there. I said, "Hey Dave, Heather and I are here at a certain jewelry store, about to buy a certain item. And I want to make sure before we do that you are cool about it." LOL, I'm always trying to cover my nerves with humor. I can't remember now exactly if I got an "about time," but I do think it was something along those lines, followed by a "welcome to the family." And I think I remember Susie screaming in the background on the phone. Another favorite memory is when we did the reveal of being pregnant with our first, Noah. We found out early in November and kept it quiet until we could tell our parents first. We had spent a long time thinking we wouldn't be able to have children, so when God blessed us with our first, we knew we had to make it special for the grandparents too, especially Heather's parents, because he was to be the first grandchild. Heather's parents just so happened to be coming in for Thanksgiving that year, which is around David's birthday. So Heather put together a little birthday surprise packet for him on the bed in the guest room on our brand new house. It was quite a year. We had our video camera ready to record the moment. Well, we refused to let him take their bags to their rooms just yet, and Dave got a little irritated, which is understandable after nearly a 6-hour drive. So, after they all got their stuff in the dining room, we walked them to the guest room slowly, and with a camera in hand, when we opened the door, Dave saw his birthday card and apparently nothing else, which would be bottles stuffed with bibs and a number of other blue and pink baby stuff, since we didn't know the gender yet. Susie screamed and grabbed Heather, asking if it was true. David had the biggest smile on his face and just kept looking back and forth between us, wondering what all the excitement was about. Both Susie and Heather were crying, and he looked at me and said, "What are they crying over, my birthday?" LOL. We finally told him to look past his birthday card, and when it finally struck him what he was looking at, he burst into tears and laughter. He stuck out his hand to shake mine and simply said, "Congratulations, young man." That was his most common name for me, young man. It was a fantastic moment that couldn't even have been scripted better. Dave had his first heart attack before all this, and I am so thankful for the good Lord to have blessed us with his presence those 8 or so years after. In that time, he got to give his oldest daughter's hand to me, which I will eternally be grateful, see us buy our first house, and be there when his 2 grandsons came into the world. And of course, he recorded and photographed it all. So many family gatherings, family portraits, museum trips, and just sharing our daily lives were captured by his camera. In his passing, we have been blessed with going through all these fantastic memories and are able to feel his love and devotion even now. and will continue to share these with his grandsons as they grow, hopefully into men that make him proud. The man left behind an amazing legacy of love and memories. We should all be as blessed as I have been. I am so thankful to have been blessed by having two great men as role models in my life. My own father, who is brilliant and wise beyond compare, and Dave, who has contagiously spread love and laughter. These two men set the bar so high on what it is to be a man and a father that I know I will spend the rest of my life merely attempting to reach that level. But it is a worthy goal, and one I hope I'm on the right path. Thank you, Dave, for all you taught me and blessing me with your love and your family. May you rest peacefully in God's kingdom, knowing that all those you leave behind will continue your legacy of generosity, kindness, laughter, and most importantly, sharing God's love with all those we meet. Love you, Papa Smeal. Jerry. Rick Leppert and Gwen Faulkner. Here they are.
Yeah, we're going to do our bit up here. It'll be obvious here in just a moment why we are taking the stage. A lot of great things have been said about Dave. I'm not going to be one of those guys. No. One phrase, 4 words. Hail, fellow, well met. First time I met Dave, I thought that. I still think that. I looked it up on that credible source, Wikipedia, earlier today to find out just what the heck that really means, and it pretty much means what you think. Outgoing, friendly, the greatest guy in the room. So, that's Dave.
He's supposed to keep me from crying.
Yeah.
Christy, would you stand up? I look like this when I met Dave Smeal. I was 30 years old. I cannot believe it. And there are 3 distinct things I remember about Dave Smeal. And I think anyone that worked with him would know these same 3 things. The first thing was, he was so hard working. He got there first, he stayed last. There was no way to out-Smeal Dave Smeal. He was always such a hard worker. And he took me in. I was actually a journalism advertising graduate from OU. I thought I was going to work in public relations, and then life got in the way of my plans, and Dave Smeal and I started working on a project, thanks to Rick Hall, called Live On University. We talked about this. And it was during the making of Live On University that my first husband and I had our first child, and so we would drive to Tulsa to record the music for Live On University, and I would be pregnant out to here, and they would have to stop at every rest stop for me. And I, because of that, decided I wanted to become a broadcast professional. My second point is that Dave Smeal led by example, and he decided I could be one. And he would take me back in the editing room, and I did audio features. I would interview Dr. George Henderson for 2 hours, and then have to pick the best 20 seconds to send to the news stations. Dr. Henderson, it pained me to whittle you down to 20 seconds, but that was my job. So I learned news judgment, but I must show you, back then, we didn't have the technology. We used razor blades and tape. And Dave Smeal took me to the back room and he said, here is the tape recorder. Here is your razor blade. Here is your tape. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do with that? And he'd go, and I go, what? And and I go, okay. And the next thing I knew, I was doing, and I was feeding it to the news stations, which brings me to my third point, and we heard Mary Ann Ray McLean say this, the Disney woman. Dave Smeal had no gender prejudice. If you were a woman and you were interested, you were every bit as capable in his mind to do anything. And so he would say, Gwen, I want you to record the Regents today. And I'd go, I've never done that. He goes, I'll show you how. And he'd go over and he'd set up the stuff and leave. And then I was supposed to record the Regents, and then I was supposed to break it down, and I was supposed to do all this stuff. And literally, I did it. Now, years later, I left the University of Oklahoma. I went on to Oklahoma City Community College. I am proud to say that all of the editing I know as a professional broadcaster, I'm acting like a professional broadcaster, Dave Smeal taught me. And I have done thousands and thousands, in 30 years, 35 years, I have done thousands of interviews and whittled them down to 20 seconds, although now it's your best 4 seconds, so it'd be even harder now. But there was one thing that I didn't realize until I married my best husband. Now, my name is Gwen Louise Culvert Faulkner Lippert. I was Gwen Louise Culvert when I came into this world. I met Dave Smeal. I was in one of his films as a student. And then I married a professor named Jim Faulkner. And we did live on university and had a band and did stuff like that. And then I wanted to be a professional broadcaster, and I went on to KTOK in Oklahoma City and OETA and some other things like that. And it was because of Dave Smeal. But it and the Smeals cheered for me when I had my daughter Erin and we did all this stuff. But I don't remember them cheering for me so much as when I met Rick Lippert. He thought we were a match made in heaven.
He did.
And I must say, how many men do you know will let you keep your worst husband's name when you marry them? And it's all because of broadcasting. You never leave the name that got you established. So I was Gwen Faulkner, and then I became Gwen Faulkner Lippert. But it wasn't until I married Rick and we were on a job together that we had our first fight.
We did.
Are you ready? Okay. Dave Smeal, let me demonstrate this.
All right.
Dave Smeal taught me how to roll a cord. For those of you that don't know, if you roll the cord correctly, you can fling it out. Oh, apparently, well, now wait a minute. Don't jump to conclusions. You can fling it out, and it has no kinks in it. Okay, so I learned how, George Ryan can attest to it. I learned how to roll cords, and I was the best. And then I met Rick Lippert. This, by the way, is Rick Lippert's cord. Now, the reason that this cord has knots in it, when I roll it, Dave Smeal taught me correctly.
I'm not so sure about that.
But it wasn't until I married Rick Lippert that it put everything in perspective. Because, are you ready? Let's see, throw your cord out, see if it knots. Let's see. All right, come out here. Come out here.
The flaw is that you got to start it right, and then once you start it right, then it will just.
Okay. Watch how we roll cords. Take your
It's very
cord.
simple. Over and under, you just twist. It's all on the wrist. Look, you see anything odd up here?
Dave Smeal was left-handed. I only know how to roll cords left-handed. Our first fight on the job was I rolled the cord and he went, what? Take it.
What are you doing?
I'm rolling the cord.
That's not how you roll a cord. You roll a cord this way.
Right-handed. It's almost like Apple and PC people.
Very much.
So I only know how to roll a cord. And see, look, because his cords are all trained, right-handed.
So if there's one thing somewhat critical anyone here today can say about Dave is that he rode chords backwards.
And you know, maybe that's why we were such a good fit. Dave Smeal saw something in me that I did not know I could do. And everything I'm doing today goes back to that Dave Smeal saw it in me first. And for that, I am eternally grateful to the Smeals. Thank you all very much.
The celebration is continuing, and I am touched by the amount of laughter. Laughter has to be there all the time. Larry Gilbert passed away a few years ago, who wrote MASH and Tootsie and everything. His tombstone says, "Finally a plot." Don Thunger, a friend. Dave and I were friends through high school and college. In fact, Dave came to Oklahoma from Canada at my urging. Dave was my best man when I married in 1963. I subsequently enrolled at TU, and since my firstborn was only months old when I commenced classes in the spring of '64, I left my wife and daughter in Calgary for that first semester. Instead of rooming with my wife and daughter, I took a roommate by the name of Dave Smeal. Smeal responded to my encouragement that he look at the journalism program at Tulsa. Both Canadians from rather harsh climates, we were unfamiliar with the critters commonly found in an Oklahoma environment. The first night Dave climbed into bed, he realized he had a visitor. And thereafter, without exception, the first order of business when preparing to retire was a flashlight in hand, a quick sweep under the covers. That same year, Johnson put out a wax with Raid in it, and we did the entire apartment. The next morning, we were made infinitely aware of the fact that we shared our apartment with a lot fewer uninvited guests. Note from family, now we know why we kept 1 or 2 flashlights in every room. Take it away, Kenny.
I want to show y'all something. This is what the room is like without Dave. And when Dave is here, that's the room with Dave. He had such an aura. He was so loving and kind. He was strong. He was hardworking. Every time I spoke to him, he lifted me up higher. And he'll be missed by all of us. We met through Ned Hoffman and had a nice relationship that way. We both loved Ned. Talked about Ned a lot. I had a birthday yesterday, so every time you have one of those, you get a little retrospect. And I'm thinking, you know, I'm sure mine are numbered to some degree. And now that David is on the other side, I'm not so scared. I want to go hang with my buddies, you know. So, one of the most impressive things to me about Dave was just how loving and kind he was, what a hard worker he was. And I think all the miracles I've seen in my life, and just some of the obvious things like we as humans have lungs. Coincidentally, there's air. You know, we need warmth. Hey, there's a sun and it's just the right space away. We need sleep. We have night. So surely, all the promises made by God, I just don't think he's going to jerk the rug out from under us with the big one, the eternal life. So I just wanted to read a passage because one of Dave's greatest qualities was how loving he was. I've never seen him angry or criticize anyone. And he always had that big smile. So this reminded me most of Dave. Though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not love, I become as sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and knowledge, and though I have all faith, so I could move mountains and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long, is kind, love envieth not, love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemingly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Love never fails, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail, whether there be tongues, they shall cease, whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as I also am known. Now abideth faith, hope, and love, these three, but the greatest of these is love. I'd like to thank Dave for teaching me that in a real special way.
Kenny, would you step out here, please? You said yesterday was your birthday, right? Okay. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kenny. Happy birthday to you.
Wow, thank you all.
I think almost everybody in this room knew Ned Hockman. What was his favorite word?
Fantastic.
You got it. His daughters, Sherry and Kyle, cannot be here today, but they've sent this fantastic note. Dave Smeal was a fantastic colleague and friend, but most important, Ned and Loretta's son by heart. F is for friend. Yes, a great, caring, and loyal friend, never leaving Ned and Loretta's side, ever. A is for ace. Yes, Dave was Ned and Loretta's ace in the hole, always a son they could count on. N is for Ned and Dave, trusted friends, just like the Lone Ranger in Tonto. Kimosabi, always together. T is for terrific. Dave was a terrific historian on our dad's life film work. He cared deeply that Ned's archives arrived at the Oklahoma Historical. Society in the fall of 2013, where Dave knew the archives would be cared for and made available for future generations. A is for always. Dave's awesome energy for helping our family was always unending. S is for son. Ned and Loretta's, quote, son by heart, unquote, Dave, was always available to them. They knew they could count on Dave at all times. Dave had a special kind of way of helping them through the later years of their life. So much so, they never felt isolated from the OU Norman world they loved so very much. Dave was always there for Dad to get him to the film classes events at OU. T is for tremendous. Tremendous energy by Dave to love Ned and Loretta and care for them until the very end of their lives. Dave was a constant support for Ned and Loretta and for Cherie and Kyle all the time. I is for integrity, a very important word that describes how Dave led his life each day. C is for classy. Dave was a first-class individual with a heart of gold. His love for his wife, daughters, grandsons, family, and friends was his first priority. Dave knew what was important in life. He reminded us all by his actions. His howdy on emails, always bright, brought a smile to our faces. This was Dave's friendly salute on the emails to the people that were important to Ned and Loretta and to the people that were important in Dave's life. Yes, we just spelled out the word fantastic, Ned Hockman's favorite word, the perfect word to describe his trusted friend and son by heart, Dave Smeal. Dave was a man of many talents, but above all, he was a man of integrity, supreme kindness. He was always available to Ned and Loretta and the Hockman family. We cherish our memories of Dave's love and dedication towards Ned and Loretta, and to us, Cherie and Kyle. We will always cherish our memories and love him deeply. We are now getting John Mayer, film producer, longtime friend, on video.
My name is John Marr, and I'm very, very sorry I can't be with you today in person. I graduated from the OU School of Art in 1971. Ned Hockman introduced me to Dave Smeal in 1974. We were asked to do a film for the physics department, and back then OU was doing these monster-long hour projects. And instead, we did a stylish little 12-minute film that was very well received. It was a big, big change for OU, but Dave was not afraid to go in there and convince them that it was the right thing to do. And I'm very grateful for that. I remember one time we had to go to the south of town to shoot at an oil rig. And by the time we got there, the gate was locked. Well, what do? Well, we invoke the ancient Chinese proverb, "It is far better to seek forgiveness than to ask permission." So the crew jumped the fence and we got the shot. Since then, Dave has really consulted on every project I've done, right up until the current Bakelite film. I would call him up on the phone and he would just say, "John?" And sometimes it got to the point where the last couple of phone calls, he would just laugh when I called. I'm a little bit of a wingding, and Dave could always bring me back to the center. Last September, we had one glorious week with the Hockman daughters putting together Ned's archive. We spent, I think, 6 or 7 10-hour days going through boxes and boxes and indexing and sorting film. By the end of the day, we were just exhausted, reeling from this effort, but found out later that Dave, who had been with us all day, came back at night to put a few more hours in just to keep us on track. That's the kind of guy he was. Very quiet, never boastful. I never heard him say a bad thing about anybody. He was a very good film cameraman and editor, but I think he really shined as a still photographer. And he's the kind of guy who knew everyone. He knew the value of being connected and staying connected. He was very dedicated and loyal to his friends and his family. He's just good to be around. You know, this last month, we've all been wrestling with Dave's passing. And I have to say, I think what it is Dave Smeal had the courage to be happy. The courage to be happy. Think of it. Heather and Christy, there's no easy way through this. I think your father would like you to continue to live life well. And Susie, I think you should still take that RV trip. Dave will be with us. He's not a billionth of an inch away now, forever. He'd want us to carry on. Carry on.
Hi, my name is R.D. Floyd. I was a student of Ned Hockman's. I graduated from this university, and I was introduced to Dave Smeal by Ned Hockman and John Marr.
My name is John.
And I had the pleasure, I don't think I need a microphone. I had the pleasure of working with Dave on Women in Physics for the university back in the mid-70s. And for always communicated with him anytime I had an opportunity, I needed encouragement or advice. I last saw Dave just a few months ago. It was a remarkable meeting. We rendezvoused at a Starbucks cafe and got so busy talking, we never had any coffee. He was a remarkable conversationalist and a remarkable man, and he will be missed greatly. Thank you.
Jan? May Hans, sister-in-law to Heather.
Okay, well, first of all, when I was asked to do this, I didn't know I was going to do this out loud, and don't throw tomatoes at me, since I am a Longhorn. I can't remember a time when Dave and I got together at a family event that we didn't tease each other endlessly about being college adversaries. Oh, I'm sorry, college allegiance. I know this would have happened when my brother, JJ, married Heather from the OU world. I mean, I knew when there was a mixed marriage that we were going to have these problems. Dave was just as rabid about being an Okie fan as I am about being a Longhorn fan. He would say something like, "Boomer Sooner," and give me one of those little grins he likes to give, and I would just reply with my hook 'em horns, and we would keep moving on to the buffet line. We would talk about the upcoming rival game or about the game that just passed with great detail. If it wasn't football season, we would egg each other on about the upcoming game. Didn't matter that it wasn't for another 8 months. We had to make sure that we didn't forget about the other one's passion about our schools. Honestly, I don't think I ever went to Longview for a family gathering without something Longhorn on, just to make sure, because I knew he'd be there with OU on. Dave and I never got angry with each other about it. It was always in great fun. Now, Dave, honestly, who are you going to tease this coming up season? Who am I going to tease? I guess I'll just have to know that you're in heaven looking down at me saying, "Boomer Sooner." Oh, it's supposed to do a hook and horn, sorry.
What is a Longhorn?
Somebody named Barry Switzer.
I know, I thought it was appropriate that I followed.
Hi, I'm Barry Switzer. Dave Smeal was a friend of mine for over 40 years. When I heard of his unfortunate demise, passing, I immediately went over to his home on McCall Avenue. It's directly behind my house. I live on Timberdale, and I used to walk by his home after we both retired, because my son lived on that street, McCall, and I'd spent a lot of time in our retirement years visiting with Dave and talk about the old days. And the old days happened to be the days he came here in 1972. He joined the University of Oklahoma as an employee in our film department, and taping, I guess, at that time. We didn't have video or our technology as we do today. And Dave came in 1972 and was a part of our staff, a part of our program, and a vital part of it, him and Ned Hockman, in contributing to the success we enjoyed, because they was important to us as assistant coaches coaching on the field, our players. Dave and Ned and his crew filmed every practice and every game I coached from 1972 to 1988. It's a lot of years, 17 years. So he was a part of 13 he had 2 national championships and seasons, and 13 Big 8 conference championships that he was a part of. Through that period of time, we got to know each other quite well in the early 70s. Man, it was a different era because in that era, the technology hadn't advanced to what we have today. We were filming 16 millimeter cameras. We didn't have a processor on campus. It would take hours for us to run the film that they shot at practice to the city, to bring it back, and we wouldn't get it till sometimes 8 or 9 o'clock at night, depending on what the television station was running on the processor. We had to wait for our turn to run it through the processor. Our assistant coaches always tell Dave and Ned, hurry up, don't keep us up late tonight, because we couldn't leave the office until they got that tape back for us to look and grade our practices, look at our game plan of our offense and our defense that they filmed for us that day. So he kept us up late a lot of nights. It wasn't that we were out at a club somewhere or a bar. It was because we were waiting on film to grade. And so we gave him a tough time. We'd always say after practice every day, hey, Dave, get that film back before 8 o'clock. We want to go home early tonight. So he was well aware of his job, and he did a great job running up and down the sidelines with Susie carrying the cord behind him and him running around with the camera, filming, getting footage of the games. Today, assistant coaches walk into their offices, they sit down and writes on their computer already processed, ready for them individually to look at the tapes of their position they coach. It's a different era and different age and technology, we all know. But back in the old primitive Neanderthal era, it wasn't that way, and we relied on our film staff for us to be able to have a quality grading of our players and practices and game planning that gave us a chance to be successful. I've always felt that they were just as important as assistant coaches, managers, trainers, and medical staff. Everybody's your success in athletics is a team sport, and I've always known it's the sum part of a total group of individuals, and it's from players to coaches, your technical supporting staff, and all. And Dave was a great part of that, and was a good friend. I want to give my condolences on behalf of my players, my coaches, all the ones that knew Dave, and always recognize that smile at practice and in the dressing rooms, that we give our condolences to the family, to Susie, and children, and just want to say we'll miss him too. And I've always enjoyed our relationship, and it was a good one through the years, over 40 years of being a friend, and we'll miss him, and I'll miss him.
Do not sit and weep. I am not here, I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glinting on the snow. I am the sun on a ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circle flight. I am the soft star that shines at night. Do not sit and cry. I am not here. I did not die. This poem is by Mary Elizabeth Fry, and it's adapted by Susan Smeal.
Susie would like very much for anyone who wants to say something more before our reception. Anyone want to share either comments or stories?
We're here from Canada now.
I'm the big sister. We grew up in Alberta, and I'm the one that has the memory of our, shall we say, David's youth. We were born in Drumheller, which was not very well known until the Terrell Museum was built. And that was the mining center of Alberta at that time. My first memory of my brother, because I'm 3 years older, was the horrible smell of his regurgitated milk in his crib when he came home from the hospital. My father was a farmer, but he was working in Drumheller, and my grandfather had passed away at the same year that my brother was born. So we ended up moving from the town, I guess you would call it that, of Drumheller up to the homestead. There are cousins, and a quarter mile up the road. So we had 6 cousins to play with, and lots of cows, chickens, pigs, you name it, we had it. Plus all those prairie grains to grow and look at, and wondering what was going on. Because this was completely strange to us as kids. My brother, my memories of my brother are up until the time he moved to Oklahoma. Because we've only seen each other off and on since then, maybe once every 5 or 6 years. And said the last time was for Heather's wedding. So this is a time of, shall we say, contemplation. And wow, as the big sister, I'm the orphan of the family now. It's not an easy thing. My memories of our father are very short too, because my father passed away from brain tumor in 1948. And so the farm was being run by a returning soldier from World War II while my father was going through all of the tests and the surgeries and so forth. And what I remember, and I don't think my brother remembers this, but we used to ask this man, and I don't even remember his name, what did you do as you were a fighter in World War II? And he would teach us how to crawl through the long prairie grasses on our hands and knees like this. This is what we did when we were fighting. And the other thing was he was trying to help us learn how to swim in the Red Deer River. I have pictures of this, and eventually when I have figured out how to do it, because I'm the musician, I'm not the photographer, I will send some black and whites down to the family so they will have some history of David when he was growing up. After our father passed away, we ended up moving to Calgary. And at this point, this is when David and I sort of lived separate lives. I ended up practicing violin, practicing piano, taking ballet lessons, and was completely absorbed in developing a musical career. David, on the other hand, had the free time to meet and play with his friends and get to know the community. He didn't have quite the same, shall we say, lifestyle as I had. One of the things that he had to put up with, of course, was the fact that our mother was raising us as a music teacher. So the main bedroom in the house had been turned into a studio. And so David was relegated to the kitchen to do his homework. And I would be practicing in the piano while my mother was teaching in the studio. And one of his favorite stunts was to come in and turn on the radio while I was practicing. And I would turn up the volume at the piano, then he would turn up the volume at the radio. And this kept going on until my mother had come out of that studio and said, "What is going on here?" The other good memory I have of my brother was that he and his friends decided they were going to build some tunnels underneath my mother's garden in the backyard. Well, those tunnels lasted so well and they were shored up so well, I think he must have picked that up, though he didn't know him, from his grandfather who was a miner. They lasted so well that when he came up for that year to, shall we say, wait for his green card to be approved, he decided he was going to build Mother a garage. Well, it turned out he couldn't build the garage until he had dug up the ground and got rid of all the shoring because that tunnel was still there. The other thing that those tunnels were used for were blowing up much to the discern of my mother and the neighbors. And then, of course, he was always the big brother who had the big smile on his face. And because we didn't grow up with a father, we had a family that were called the Hamiltons. And I'm sure it was Uncle Harry, as we called him, and a good friend, Bill May, who was made his sort of father figure. That was through these two men that my mother had made sure that he got to know what dads were supposed to be like. Because he was only 5 years old when our father passed away. So it was very difficult for him to have known his real father. And his father had been ill for at least 4 years by the time he passed away. So I know my memories are scattered, but I do remember it. He was a banjo player, known as one of the best banjo pickers in the whole Drumheller area, and used to play on the weekends when he wasn't farming or mining with his banjo and his friends. And it was through his friends, Bob Hoy, that I was able to sort of get some record of what my father used to do. And of course, this was something that David didn't know anything about. And I play the piano, I play the violin, and I still teach to this day, even though I'm out of the university now, I'm out of the school board systems, and all my kids are from the age of 3 to 80, and I'm still going strong. Thank you very much, everybody.
What a story, what a story. Do we have a few more comments?
I'm an old news photographer, which is how I met Dave, probably at a fire somewhere. There are kind of three phases to our life. First of all, I've always had a little problem with this concept of a celebration of life, I guess, because when we lose a good man, a good person, it honestly pisses me off. There's several phases. I met Dave as a photographer. I ran into him here at the university a lot of times. I knew he wasn't a news photographer anymore because he had a suit, a tie, and a coat fit. Which, and then he, with our friend, a lot of us know Ned Hockman, and we all love Ned Hockman. And Ned, if he was not difficult, Ned was different. It took a lot of patience to work with Ned. And he was there. Real quick, the last time I really talked to Dave very much was we both had a heart institute about the same time. We talked on the phone, and I shared my philosophy with the research I had done, that I'm strongly suspicious that some of us are not going to get out of here alive. And we laughed about it, and damn, I wish I was wrong.
My name is Brad Quinn. I retired from RU about 8 or 9 years ago, and Susie and I worked together for, I don't know how long.
No,
10, 20? I'll stop there. But anyway, I still go down to Cross Center where Susie works sometimes. When I come out in the evening, the big old truck will be out there and Dave will be waiting for Susie. And I'll always remember he's so happy to see me and smiling, and we would talk and then leave. Never a big deal to it. I always feel like as we get older, and I'm one of those, our plans tend to turn to dreams, and then our dreams tend to turn to memories. And I think that Dave and Susie had dreams. I know personally about some, especially some that we're going to kick in pretty soon. But those memories of she and Dave will be memories now. You remember those dreams. And I always think that's just wonderful. But we all dream as we get older. I think we have these dreams and about what we're going to be and where we're going to go and what we're going to do with our lives. And half of them never go anywhere. But the memory of dreaming is important. So all I can say in closing is that Dave will always be at Cross Center. I know you'll be retiring in December, waiting for Susie. And Susie is Susie is his best friend. I know that. I would like to say something about Susie because she and Dave, you'll hear thousands of words about Dave, but Susie is the one who's his best partner in front of all the time. So,
minute or two? Story? We have two more letters. One of the letters is actually the printed one. What do we do, just the one, or do you want both? One is printed and one is... Yeah. Read the other one.
Read the other one that is.
All right. Well, I don't know if you're going to share what hitting the road might mean for you with the continuing the journey, but I shared with you when we were talking a little while ago, a few days ago, that in my life I've met many filmmakers, and when I was writing books about the collapse of communism in Soviet cinema, I met a Kazakh filmmaker, and his name was not Borat. He said, "You have to understand, Andy, the important things in life. We believe that you should never own more in your life than you can put on one camel." That's been hard. That's been hard for many of us. But did you want to share the journey you may be taking?
Dave and I had the dream to literally get rid of everything and go into an RV and travel and see this wonderful country of ours. And I was contemplating retiring either late this year or very early next year. And it's still going to happen. I am going to continue our dream, and I'm going to carry David with me. As many of you know, and maybe some of you don't know, David was an organ donor. David lives on. And through his wonderful gift of organ donation, you know, others are able to continue their lives. And so I will be soon getting David back, and David will be with me as we journey together.
Not a camel, but an RV. There you go. There are two more letters that came in late yesterday. One of them you have printed in the handout, the printout. But the one that's not there, I'm going to read. The one that's printed is by Dave Thorson, childhood bud of Dave's, with some great adventures to tell. Really think the audience will enjoy it. You have them printed. The other one that's not printed is Brian Hamrick. Was hired by Dave, and they shared a great kinship even after Brian moved on. They stayed in touch over the years. Brian was a son to Dave, like Dave was the son for Ned. Dave had two sons, actually, Jay Heather's husband and Brian, both cut of the same cloth. If they ever met, they would feel like brothers, as they both had the same temperament. Okay, here's that letter, our last letter here. The one thing I'll always remember about Dave Smeal are the million things that I won't forget. I think Dave's personality was a little like one of those giant stained glass windows. It's not one single piece that makes it, but how all of the pieces come together. It was a demeanor with layers, that constant broadcast voice, unshakable smile, and inspirational calm. Dave had an array of expressions that told you what was on his mind immediately. If you were telling him an amusing story and he suddenly saw the ending of it before you got there, he had this look and this laugh. He'd say, "Oh no," laugh, then say something like, "Here we go." Dave wasn't afraid to be proud of other people. He would always have something good to say about an achievement, usually started with a hand on the shoulder and a phrase like, "My friend." He was genuinely interested in other people. He loved to hear their stories. I should know I had plenty of them. A shock, I know. I'd say Dave was the best listener I've ever known. That's a quality, isn't it? Best listener. Ned Hockman would tell you the same thing, and Ned told a story or two in his day. I think this was part of Dave's interest in news, not only listening to those stories, but telling them. One of the last things Dave sent me was just a week or so before he passed away. It was a CBS morning news story that really was well done. It was called World War II Widow's Journey. He recognized the outstanding storytelling techniques and knew I would appreciate them as much as he did. Just sending that story was like having a conversation with him, but not saying a word. I watched that. At least 20 things jumped out at me, and I know Dave wanted me to see. Dave was always forward-thinking. Like the Will Rogers of technology, he never met a gadget he didn't like. He always wanted to know about the latest developments in news gathering and was right on top of them. I'd be telling him about some new way we're doing live shots with our phone or sending video or interacting with the newsroom from the field. He would be asking questions at every turn. I was always amazed that he was able to ask the most insightful questions. It was as if he had never left the newsroom. He was asking the exact questions the reporters and photographers were asking when we were first briefed on whatever new hardware or software came about. He not only understood how it would work, but what the snags would likely be. Dave was a great news mentor, but an even better mentor of life. The last time I saw Dave, he was driving Christy and a U-Haul to Cleveland. They stopped by my place outside of Cincinnati. It was a great visit. I snapped a couple of pictures that day and included them. I was so glad they got to meet my boys. Aaron is the oldest, then Ellie and Isaac. Teresa's twin sister and her husband and son were there too. You can tell, trying to tell people about someone like Dave, but not even the best storyteller can really paint the complete picture. Dave and daughter were on an adventure. It was exactly what you'd expect if you were writing the scene into a movie. Dave always loved doing things with the family. I think about every story I ever heard Dave tell included Susie, Heather, Christy, and in recent years, the grandchildren. Dave was never rattled. Wow. I've told the story many times about a 10-minute video project we were putting together. Every shot was thought out with a time mode logged. We were overseeing the edit at a digital facility. The editor was much slower than we anticipated. The project was due on Friday, but by Tuesday, we had just 2 minutes complete. Even in West Virginia, we know that math ain't gonna add up. I was all wound up about it, and we headed to the facility on Wednesday. I'm being rather expressive about just taking the project back to our edit booth and finishing it myself. Dave listened for a block or two as my tone apparently seethed with agitation. Then Dave said with that deep resonance, "Brian, take the edge out of your voice." Even I had to laugh. I said, "Dave, that's the nicest anything anyone has ever told me, way to say shut up." I remember when I first came to OU, Dave immediately treated me like one of the team. I mean, look, we had the likes of Gordon Green, the grizzled actor, writer, teacher, preacher, radio man, you get the idea. We had the likes of Bill Williams, the artist, ad man, painter, photographer, graphs. We had Gil Jane, George Dotson, and a long list of others who were top-notch in their field. Where did the last page go?
It's up on the podium.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. How Dave was consideration to my ideas of views or whatever was in front of us. I've never forgotten the respect Dave gave the ideas of the young people who didn't know a third about a problem and the issues as he did. Dave liked to get the perspective. I think about that every single time an intern or a young reporter shows up at the station. Those are the kinds of little pieces of glass that are so key to the big picture, but you have to look at the windows a long time to see it. When my days are gone here, if they let the people who put you at ease to meet you on the other side you pass through, I'm sure Dave Smeal will be standing there. Okay.
I got one last thing to say.
Yes.
When you said Dave has never been rattled in that letter, well, let me tell you, Dave worked for a television station in Tulsa. And there was a guy there named Don Stubbs that moved in, and he was kind of the anchor, and he was from, I think from Las Vegas. And Stubbs says, Dave, let's go have a drink this evening. I want to introduce you to some people. So he sits down, there's three guys sitting there. He said, I want you to meet Alfonso. And he represents the mafia out of Kansas City. And these other two guys pull out a gun and lay it on the table. Dave said he almost had to change his underwear. Scared the hell out of him. And he said he couldn't get out of there fast enough. And Stubbs thought that was the big, funniest thing ever. But they were having a little meeting in Tulsa from Kansas City. And Dave says, I don't want to know these people. By the way, Dave's a good Christian, and we'll all see him again.
Yes, we will.
Thank you, everyone. Susie, is there anything to say before the reception?
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for helping us to celebrate and remember Dave. And, gee, as Ned would say, fantastic.
Thank you, Susie and family. And this has been a celebration that's going to continue with the reception, yes?
Yes. All right.